Good. So you said you're rolling up Leafly's 2022 strain of the year. Is that what you said?
Well, yeah, I had some. I guess they picked Jealousy was their strain of the year. And I had some in the house, so I just grabbed that to smoke in honor of the countdown of top news stories of Illinois cannabis of 2022.
Hell yeah, you heard it, folks. We're heading into 2023, and so Philip came up with a brilliant idea. Why don't we recap our favorite stories from 2022? So that's what this is going to be. And we'll dive pretty deep on these stories. I have a feeling. But if you're looking for a deeper dive just into history, the history of cannabis itself, I'd love to plug episode number 232 of our podcast. It features Philip and myself, and it is part one of the history of cannabis in Illinois. We start in the year of 1979, and we go all the way up to the first day of adult use sales, which was of course January 1st, 2020. Am I correct on that one? I think that was
Hmm.
the first day. Yeah. So we go all the way up to there, and stay tuned. We'll be picking up where we left off. But today, since we're going into 2023, we thought, like you said, it'd be good to talk about our top stories. So I'll let you kick it off, man. What's your top story for 2022? And I know we didn't put our list in any particular order, but if you had to pick one.
Yeah, mine are just by date. This is the first one from February, but it would also be probably my top one. It was Carol Amon's introducing a bill to legalize home grow for all.
Fuck yeah. Let me pull that up. You just sent me that. Yeah, I like, if I'm remembering this bill correctly, I liked this bill because it basically was a copy and paste of the language for medical cannabis cultivation, except it just added that adults 21 years of age or older um, could grow. So I'm going to share the bill really quickly. Well, I don't know if you mentioned this already, but the bill didn't go anywhere, unfortunately, and we think it's going to die, which means
Well, it looks
that,
like you can see who jumped on here as co-sponsors. Like LaShawn Ford was a co-sponsor, I guess.
yeah, yeah, check that out. So for folks that are
Chief
listening and want
Chief
to,
co-sponsor Kelly Cassidy.
yeah, nice. So that's interesting to see them working together. For folks that are listening and want to look this up, it's House Bill 4799 from the 102nd General Assembly. We'll put the link in the podcast description. But yeah, I'm sharing my screen right now, and it basically provides that an Illinois resident 21 years of age or older, um, rather than just a person who is a qualifying patient, may cultivate cannabis plants with a limit of 5 plants that are more than 5 inches tall. That's word for word from the medical law. And then one of the things that you and I both liked about this provision is that it said any amount that exceeds 30 grams must be secured within the household. And we love that language because what that language means is that Illinois is what we call a keep what you grow state. In other words, if you're a medical cannabis patient, you do not have a possession limit at home. And if language like this became law for all adults, the same would apply. And I think that is one step closer to freedom. Uh, you know.
Well, there would be, you know, technically they couldn't really get you in trouble in a well, I mean, I'm sure there's circumstances in which if they found a ton of weed in your house, they could still get you in trouble, claiming you were getting it from somewhere you shouldn't have been or selling it to people you shouldn't have been. But
Or
if it's
saying
just
it's
like
not
a
secured, right?
well, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But if it was just, you know, yeah, that at least gets rid of a lot of cases of possession limits violations in like people's homes, I would think, because they couldn't argue,
I see
how
what
would
you're
they know
saying.
you didn't grow it? It could have been from a year ago. You lived in a different house and you just took it with you to this new house and you don't have
Right.
any of your stuff anymore.
Right. And I love that you brought that up because that's how I view it. Like, you're absolutely right that doesn't just mean, it wouldn't just mean that necessarily you could Just have as much as you want, but if you just, let's pretend that it was all home cultivated, that's what that would be my recommendation to anybody. If you're going to have a large quantity of cannabis, follow the laws with regard to all quantities
Try to make it
of,
look like you plausibly could have grown it
yeah, and
yourself.
just plead the
Don't keep
fifth.
it around in like 100 pre-packs.
Right, next to your scale. Yeah. Be smart about it. And yeah, so that, let's hope and let's try to put pressure on our elected representatives to introduce something similar or better. Frankly, I'll take what I can get, but the limit of 5 plants is still pretty restrictive. But again, I'll take what I can get.
I wouldn't be surprised if something with like a homegrown moves this year or next, just because Missouri having it now, like there's just like so little excuse
Right.
not to have it if you're like a legal state. Like Missouri has more liberal cultivation laws than we have. Like they can do 6 plants, is what I mean. And I think they have like, it's like 6 flowering, 6 in veg, and 6 something else. There's
Right.
like 3 different states they, instead of like the 5-inch
Hmm.
rule.
I
Um,
like that.
yeah, so it seems like the 5 plants over 5 inches is like even conservative compared to Michigan or Missouri at this point.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that is something that I've heard in the past. Advocates propose that we move forward with a sort of tiered system like that. I think even Michigan does something similar where you can have, a certain number in flower, but a certain number, in veg, and those totals don't, conflict with each other, which is nice.
Yeah, I would think it would just be like flowering plants because if they aren't flowering, I mean, I don't even know how that Illinois law really holds up because if they aren't flowering, aren't they like the same as hemp?
Absolutely. And that's what a lot of people have been saying, or at least I've heard people say, is like, look, just, you know, grow as many as you want in veg and claim they're hemp. And I'm just like, I don't know. I'd like to see precedent on that.
Well,
But I
and
follow your
yeah,
logic.
because I mean, do you want to be the one who's going to challenge the law
Right.
if you do get in trouble? So
Exactly.
if you're up for
Exactly.
that, sure.
Yeah, if you're up for that, please. Please do. If you have the money and the time,
Go ahead. We
please.
would love to find out.
Yeah, and we'll report on it every step of the way. We'll have your back. you know. So, hell yeah. That is a freaking awesome story that unfortunately didn't go anywhere this year, but let's hope that it goes somewhere next year, right? Let's hope. So, um I can go with an article if you
Yeah, yeah, let's switch off.
sure. I like this article. I almost feel like it was a little lazy of me to pick this one, but it's a good one. It's the one I have listed right at the top of my document that I sent you. It's a headline by the Chicago Tribune that says, "Boom time for marijuana sales in Illinois. As industry expands with new products, minorities get left behind." And the reason I feel like this was a lazy pick is because it was the first story of 2022. It was literally published on January 1st, 2022. But I liked it a lot because it so eloquently recapped 2021. And I know the purpose of today was 2022, but this is just, it's great, and like we said in episode 232, it's important to have
Well, and
this history.
say that headline again.
Yeah, boom time for marijuana sales in Illinois as industry expands with new products, but minority businesses get left behind.
So they could just reprint that story in 2 days.
They really could.
Just
They
update
re-
it the tiniest bit.
yeah,
That headline would still stand though.
yep. And I think this was written by Bob McCoppin, so it's written in a style that we really like, where it's just flat, fact-based, delivery. Yeah, written by Bob McCoppin. So let me read a few excerpts from this article. This is why I loved it so much. So while 2021 was a boom time for legal marijuana sales in Illinois, it was another wasted year for minority entrepreneurs trying to break into the business and a mixed experience for customers. Going to disagree with you on that, Bob McCoppin. Um, I think the experience for customers was pretty uniform. I don't think anybody was super
Well,
happy.
we would consider it abysmal, but there are plenty of people that are totally
you,
content with it.
you make a great point. Yeah, we don't have to name any names necessarily, but I know I'm aware of one individual who tells at least people to just be happy and to support
Well,
this market,
I just think too that there's a lot of people that don't know the difference. There's a lot of people that are very new to cannabis.
Yeah.
So
And those
like
are the
the
people that I give a
prices,
break. Those are the people that I give a break. But the people that are knowingly pushing this, oh, you got to support the market. That I hate that narrative.
yeah, no, 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 no.
Yeah. But yeah, I give those people room. Thank you for bringing those people up. The people that just
Well,
truly,
just yeah, it's like you just have to remember like there are people that are actually like, "Oh, I'm happy and going to the shop down the street," like instead of hating on it the whole time because they know there are better alternatives elsewhere.
Mhm. It's very true. It's very true. So recreational cannabis sales continued to climb steadily in the year of 2021 to more than 1.2 billion, roughly an 85% increase from 2020 through November of that year alone. The medical cannabis program reached 136,000 active patients who spent another 362 million. The sales generated more than $300 million in tax revenue in fiscal year 2021, more than from alcohol. Thought that was interesting. Here's what I really liked. So after new applicants waited through more than a year of delays for business licenses, judges prevented them from opening dispensaries while litigation dragged on with no solution in sight. The year saw many twists in the cannabis field. Sales took off for hemp-derived Delta-8 THC called Weed Light, despite existing in a legal gray area. Yeah, you can basically find Delta-8 anywhere to this day. Huge multi-state companies gobbled up independent dispensaries and expanded dramatically. And one constant, prices of marijuana in Illinois remained among the highest in the nation. Several companies founded and headquartered in Chicago have become the largest operators in the nation, while out-of-state operators have come into Illinois by opening new facilities or buying up competitors. Cresco Labs and Curaleaf each have grown to the maximum 10 retail sites. PharmaCann has 8, Ascend Wellness 7, GTI 9, New Era 6, ZenLeaf 10. Together, that means 7 companies control 60 of the 110 weed stores in the state. The number of growers is even more limited. A mere 18 companies are allowed to grow cannabis, compared with hundreds that do so in Western states like Oregon or California, where they have the opposite problem of oversupply. By state law, there was supposed to be a slew of new businesses licensed in 2021, with favoritism toward poor, largely minority areas with high rates of cannabis arrests. But after a series of delays, applicants claimed that consultant KPMG had scored applications unfairly, resulting in wealthy, white, politically connected winners. That's my number one article for 2022. And I know that was basically all about 2021, but it's quite a way to kick off 2022. You know what I'm saying?
And not too much has changed as of yet. Things I think are like on the cusp of changing a bit, but
Yeah, absolutely.
there's
Absolutely.
actually I saw there's a that company Starbuds is one of the new like craft growers and they have dispensaries. They have a shop that's opening like 15 minutes from me. I just thought it was kind of interesting. I saw they had like a final inspection or something the other day.
Yeah.
So they should be open pretty soon. But it's just yeah, like this side of Chicago, there aren't the same number of dispensaries as like the north side. So that's not really on the south. That's over in like Burbank, I think. But like, it's another option for people over here.
Yeah.
It'll be
I just
interesting to see what they do.
it definitely will be. Just that number, 7 companies control 60 of the 110 weed stores. That's more than half, right?
I think that number is also probably like grown
Old.
because like
Yeah, yeah.
isn't
It's a
has
old
like
number.
air wasn't listed in there.
Well, and then you've got, well, you just mentioned Starbuds, but you've also got those two other dispensaries that are definitely not part of that count, Green Rose and Ivy
Oh
Hall.
well, yeah, those have like I was just talking about even the original 110 like have been more gobbled up by companies like
Mm,
consolidated.
that's a good question. Yeah, I don't know.
I think
Probably though.
since then, I
Yeah.
think in the last year there had to have been someone bought out.
Hmm.
I mean, Cresco and Columbia Care was probably within the last year.
Right. I think you're correct on that for sure. That was within the last year because we did that for April 1st joke that we got purchased by Cresco. So um so yeah, I think you're right on target. But to your point, I would bet you that number's changed because one of the main points that I mentioned was that some people weren't at their maximum. And so I'm sure if there were
Hmm.
still any independent dispensaries left, for example, um, may have been gobbled up. So
Well, and I'll throw in next the article I set aside, which was Grown In's about Illinois' cannabis prices remaining among the highest in the nation, because that kind of goes along with the one you just suggested.
yeah,
So that is
tell me,
my next top story.
yeah, get into it. Tell us about it.
I'm just looking at it. When recreational sales first went online in January 2020, the Sun-Times reported an eighth in Illinois at retail could cost as much as $62, making it the most expensive in the nation. While the highest price crown has now been passed to Washington, D.C., prices in Illinois still remain the highest among adult use states, with Illinois prices for an ounce costing as much as $354, behind only Virginia and Maryland among adult use states.
Wow.
Rep. LaShawn Ford, a leader on state cannabis legislation, puts blame on Illinois' numerous taxes. That's interesting, ranging from retail sales tax to a tax on potency. Yeah, while he acknowledges the prices can be a burden to the consumer, he believes the revenue provides an overall net positive to state residents, which is that's that whole way of thinking is like in line with what Illinois does.
Yeah.
I like this next line from him. This is just the beginning of the quote, but he just says, "Everyone wants a piece of the pie."
Man, I just the whole taxes thing, I've heard that before, and it's like that's why Illinois weed is so expensive. It's like, is it?
Well, I don't know what I know the sales tax is not that out of line with like Washington. That's what I've heard because Washington state has a pretty high tax, but their prices are so low that it ends up being like less of a burden and like less, it adds on less to the overall. You're just spending less.
Yeah, I got to find the article. It'll be in our, the second part of our history on Illinois cannabis. But I believe that at the time, Illinois was one of the first states to incorporate THC percentage into taxation.
Oh, look,
Okay.
Cole, you're quoted in here. Cole Preston, host of Chillinois podcast, believes more growers and licensees may help bring down the cost burden on consumers.
What a fucking idiot.
It is both those things though. Because like doesn't Illinois have like a wholesale tax? Like a
Yes.
like a when you sell from the retailer or from the wholesaler to the retailer, there's like a 7% tax or something like that. So that sales tax you're paying. And then there's all the fees, like the yearly tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars that they make these people pay is just a one-time tax. That might as well just be a percentage on their earnings. So,
Are you saying that like maybe that also contributes to the high prices?
well, that like the tax burden can be more than just the like tax you're paying as a consumer at the
Fair.
like say in the sales tax.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't even know that I was quoted. I think that I was right on target though. I was on the right track. um, we need more growers. We like I don't know. It seems really simple to me. I know that part definitely plays into it, but as far as like I mean supply and demand goes, it's always made sense to me why the prices are so high. Like, you remember I just told you today that I started my Instagram page. If folks go to follow us on Instagram and scroll all the way back to our first posts, you'll see that I was trying to do product reviews at the time because that's what I thought I wanted to do. I was a medical patient at the time and the prices were so goddamn high. Um, but I was like, am I high right now? What the fuck is going? I mean, I was, but I was like, am I, what is going on here? And then I started just looking at, well, how many brands are there? And I just started to think about the spirit of competition and it all started to make sense. I'm like, look, there are two shops near me and their attitudes are, where are you going to go? You want legal cannabis? We're the two places in town,
Yeah, and
you
I don't
know?
know how prices are like where you are or even more downstate. Like in Chicago, I mean, I know they've gotten better. Like there are deals that people get, there are
Right.
prices people get that are not terrible. Um, but it's still too much.
It's still too much. And what I've heard, and this, you can chalk this up to anecdotal conjecture for sure. I like to try to preface, that. But I've heard that most of the deal, because I've started to see more deals too. I like to check the dispensary menu every once in a while, just for the fuck of it. I don't go there
Hmm.
anymore, but just to see what the market's behaving like. And there are more deals downstate, more deals than I've seen since adult use launched. Because before adult use was the thing, I used to be a medical patient. That's how I met Justine. I would go in there from time to time, and by time to time I meant like every other day, and just get something new, try something new. And guess what they would do sometimes? They'd hand you a couple free joints. There would be giveaways, like
Interesting. Yeah.
uh like I told you in another episode, they used to take the time to have product samples that you could smell and see before you purchase the product. They took the time to do these things in the past, and um yeah,
These
kind of all
shops are, well, these shops are so busy,
right.
like they
And I
just have
get
a
it.
constant, they have a lot of traffic just in and out.
Hmm.
Certainly busier than like most places that I'll stop at over in Michigan, where you might be one of two cars in the parking lot.
Yeah, and you can feel it when you get in line, like when you interface with a bud tender. Like there was an instance in the past few months where I was like going to an event and I wanted to be super duper high there, but I didn't want to smell like weed. So I was like, going to I didn't have any cartridges that I felt were going to last through the entire wedding. I had one that was low from Michigan. And I was like, well, going to Illinois, an Illinois dispensary. And it was just a matter of convenience. I knew I could go there, get a cart, pay a
Hmm.
convenience price basically and get that product. But I guess what I'm saying is you could really feel it when you get up to a terminal. I've been shopping in Michigan so long. It's been a while where I felt rushed, and it's not like I was even asking any questions. Like I went in there knowing what I wanted. I know some people go in there and they're like, what will make me feel like this today? And it becomes a whole fucking conversation. Like I wasn't even, but you could just tell the bud tender was like, let's get you in and out of here, motherfucker. Like we got a line.
I will say the last time I was at a shop in the state was probably a little over maybe like a year ago. But I went in for I needed to be sure I had some edibles that were 5 milligrams.
Hmm.
Uh, and the place was super busy. It was like a Cureleaf location, I think, if I remember right. Um, and I will say, like, as a medical patient, they were like, I showed my card and they were like, hey, like I was
Hmm.
like in that and out of that place in like 5 minutes. So
Yeah, dude.
they certainly do still give priority to medical
That's for fucking
patients.
sure. I've gone in there, and that's kind of what I was trying to tell you is that like the reason I was getting snappy, like because I cut in front of a line of like 45 fucking people because I have my medical card. They're all looking like, who's this guy? And I'm like, sorry, I paid the state
Well,
for this.
I've heard some people have trouble with that at certain spots, and I don't know
Really?
if that's just their misunderstanding
No, I've heard it
or
too. I
they
mean,
didn't do it right or
I just heard it today. We're kind of going back and forth. I don't mean to get on a tangent, but this whole curbside thing. And somebody literally just said today that there's a store operating where it has like 5 adult use lines open, but only 1 medical. And it's like, so, there was like a line at the medical computer.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? All of a
Right, right,
sudden it gets,
right.
so yeah, I mean, to your point, I've heard of those things too. And for all intents and purposes, I believe that is a violation of the law. I mean, I don't know exactly, but what I do know is that you can report that. I don't have the complaint report form off the top of my head, but here's a funny way you can
You
find
can
it.
call the Chillinois hotline.
You can call the Chillinois hotline. I'll say that number here in a second because I haven't plugged it on a show yet. Or you can go to iltrees.com. That'll take you to Illinois Trees on Reddit. And in the About section, that I put a link in there for reporting dispensaries. So if you come across that, if you're listening right now and you feel like you're not getting the priority that you should, submit a complaint and have them look into it. Be prepared to provide timestamps because they record everything. They know when you were there, but help them out a little bit. Like you got to narrow it down so they can look into it and investigate it and see if somebody violated that language where you're supposed to give priority. I don't know how we got off on
What's
this.
your
Oh,
next story?
well, before I get to my next story, I wanted to say something just really quick, that I think is like relevant to what we're talking about. I've noticed that the vibe in Chicago dispensaries is completely different, and at least the ones that I've been to, than the ones I've been to in Southern Illinois. You remember in our last show with Marianne Longcar, the history of cannabis 1.5, I was telling you that
Mm-hmm.
we have bulletproof glasses down here.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that you've just kind of been let in before, and I was thinking about my experiences, and I was like, yeah, the Chicago pot shops I've been to have more of a dispensary feel than the ones that I've been to downstate. And by that I mean they're playing music, there's like a couch, you know what I mean? Like it
Mm-hmm.
feels kind of like a dispensary. The ones in Champaign that I've primarily been to, and I've been to one in Effingham as well, just a very pharmaceutical feel. Um,
Mm.
you know, like the windows are fogged, which I believe is a statewide
Oh
regulation,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
like it just literally feels like a pharmacy, when you go there. I mean, Cresco feels a little bit more like a corporate weed shop, of course, but New Med, for example, and maybe that's their goal. Or I guess their new era now, but they used to be New Med. So maybe their goal was to feel like a pharmacy. I don't know. But I just wanted to say that to your point from last time that it does feel like the vibe's a little.
Well, and I think that's how these new shops are going to try to like differentiate themselves. They're going to try to make them more friendly. I mean, because that's the only way to really like differentiate yourself is your customer service at this point, customer service or your price,
Yeah.
because you're kind of all moving the same stuff.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the Ivy Hall, they call themselves, this is a new, they're trying now exactly what you're saying. They're doing the sensory dispensary thing. Did you see that?
Yeah. Hmm.
I loved that JB was smelling the terpenes. I really want to like somebody can steal this idea if they want to. I want since he's in a dispensary, like you could easily mess with the footage to make it seem like he just hit something, like she handed it to him and he hit it. Cause he like smells it and then he's like just like coughing, like. So free game out there if you guys want to make a meme. There you go.
Yeah, I think he takes a drink of water right after it too.
He does. Somebody hands him a water. So it's like perfect. And he's in a
It is
dispensary.
perfect.
So folks, steal the idea. Okay. So my story. Sorry, I wanted to say that really quick because I felt like it
Mhm.
was relevant. So I liked this story. Positive drug tests will no longer stop expungements in a new law. And I'm gonna pull up a text I actually got from Evan Bruno when he's the one that notified me when this kind of got pushed through. He's like, check this out. But while I pull that up, what do you think about that? Isn't it funny that it took like that long for that to be a thing?
I mean, it's crazy it was a requirement
Right.
or like wasn't a provision they included if that was like a requirement just to get any kind of thing expunged, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know
Exactly.
how that wound up being that way.
It's
But also, I
crazy.
don't know, in Illinois, can you smoke weed if you're on parole or not parole? Yeah, I
Probation.
guess probation. Yeah.
I don't know. They've addressed that in other states, but I've never heard of it in Illinois. Haven't
Like
have you read
probation
about it?
or parole is when you're like charged with a crime and you're let out like on bail, right?
I don't know.
Whenever you're under like court supervision, like
Hmm.
are you allowed to smoke weed? And are you allowed to if you're a medical patient would be my question. Because that'd be an
Right.
interesting, because I know that was like a thing that Michigan went through like a little while ago.
Hmm. That's who I was thinking of. I think I was going to tell you that I don't know the answer to your question, but I can tell you that I thought other states had done it. So,
Hmm. I think it came through like a court decision over there. It wasn't like something in their legislature, I don't think.
hmm, yeah, it would only make fucking sense. But generally, the reason you're
Well, at
even
least if
asking
you
that
have a
question,
at least if you have a card, because I would understand telling someone you can't smoke weed just like, I mean, courts will tell you you can't drink alcohol. Courts will tell you you can't do all kinds of things. But if you have a med card, it would seem like there's a little more reason not to do that.
yeah, yeah. But you know what?
Especially if you're someone who's like a like opiate alternative program type thing or
Right,
something like that, you know?
right. Um, what I was gonna say is it's funny, like while I said like you would think, I mean, it would make sense, but the whole reason you're asking this question is because nothing fucking makes sense with regard to policy in cannabis.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
So
Especially I mean in this state, yeah, especially.
yeah. So Illinois lawmakers passed, a law. At the time the article was, they were hoping to expunge more cannabis records by dropping the drug test requirement. And so uh Evan Bruno texted me this and he said, I hadn't realized you needed a negative marijuana test to be eligible for expungement of past charges. How fucking stupid can a rule get? And then this next text is so perfect. I told him I was going to steal this. So, Evan, if you're listening right now, and if you haven't listened to our episode with Evan Bruno, check it out. We've done two, and he's super cool. Got to do another one in the future. He said he's like acting like he's the state right now. So, this is his state of Illinois impression. You can expunge your marijuana case because marijuana is actually not bad, but only if you don't use marijuana, which is bad. I just love I don't know.
But that's so much of like our attitude in Illinois. It's like we're legalizing it, but it's not good. So we're gonna like really, really regulate the shit out of it.
Yeah, and
Not
in a
all of you can grow it.
thank you. Yeah, I was gonna say that was a point you made. I don't know if it was in the last podcast or I just saw you make it online, but it's it's so bad that only a few people should be able to grow it. We don't want to get crazy here. Right? They act like
I like to think like how would the world be different if there was just like a garbage pail of weed on every corner or every street? Like would the world fall apart? Would there be riots in the street? Would nobody be able to show up to work because we'd all be high and
yeah.
like it like what is the fear, you know?
Well, I don't mean to just like jump right to it, but frankly, I am just becoming more and more confident that this is the fear. The fear is that you're not going to be able to make money selling fucking weed.
Well, yeah, a lot of the rules and regulate, yeah, totally.
I mean, literally, somebody just you saw it on a good friend of mine the other day was saying, they're in the industry in another state and they can't make money there because the competition is so fierce. They can't make money there. And so they were telling me that they're starting to see the value in the Illinois limitations and they're really hoping they can get that license because then they could make
I
some money,
wonder how much
you know?
I wonder how much of not making money though is the cost put on the industry by government wanting their cut and over regulating the shit out of the industry too, you know? Because
I
it's
mean,
like you're
that's
putting all these, well, I mean, that's not like a new idea, but it's like if you had the ability to deduct all your business expenses and stuff, and landlords weren't able to charge you three times they charge other businesses, and there's like even beyond the taxes that government puts on and all the regulations, there's also like the weed tax of just doing like people just charge weed businesses more to work because they think you're like flush with so much money. So I
Right.
just wonder how much of that is just like a now thing of just everyone wanting to milk this cow.
Hmm. But just to your point, I love bringing up little pieces of context, and I'm going to try to find the story. But GTI has had to give up one of their cannabis licenses in the past in the state of Illinois.
Oh, because they didn't want to pay the like 200 grand.
Right, they couldn't. And so to your point of, or at least that's I think what they, I don't know, they said something to that effect that they couldn't, like they would not have been able to afford it. They cited the number of patients at the time, which was only 3,000.
Well,
Um,
do they have one or two of those cultivation licenses now?
I believe they have two, but they had three. I'm gonna try to find this story so I can make
Interesting. Yeah.
sure to
I mean, like, yeah, two is probably more than enough. So I'm sure whatever money they got from selling that third one was like worth it.
yeah. And it's still unclear to me. I like to put these open questions out there so that people understand this is how we approach these things. Like, you remember I told you I felt like I was pretty clear on adult use canopy space versus medical the other day?
Hmm.
And like, because an article laid it out, they said, adult use is limited to 210,000, but if you have a medical cannabis license, you literally have no limit. And I was like, well, fuck, that's fucking crazy. And I mean, literally, Revolution was talking
Is
about,
that the case?
it is the case, but what I found out, just like I need to find the language, is my point. So, Grown in a report in like 2020, because that's about where I am in my analysis, said you can have no limit for one of your medical licenses. So I'm like, I don't know. I got to find the language in the law. Every time I try to
What
look
does
for
that
it in
even
this,
mean?
right? I don't. That's the thing. I'm like, I finally thought it was clear for
If you
me.
have
Like,
no limit for one of them, what does it matter how many other ones you have?
uh-huh,
Except if
yeah,
it's like, except if I think one of, isn't it that they're location based? So you could have one site that could be as large as you would ever want to make it, but the other two sites would have to be limited to whatever the limit
mm,
is.
interesting.
Because I know
Yeah,
that's one of the reasons like some of these licensees haven't scaled up to 200,000 square feet or whatever they can, is because they're actually limited on how much space they have physically. I
interesting.
remember hearing that somewhere.
Yeah, I can't find this GTI story. I'll try to find it though. It happened. It was sometime in like 2015 or 2014. So that's why I'm having or well, not in 2015, like 2016, 2017, the very beginning of the program. So we'll find it before the end of this, but I think it's your turn. We talked about positive drug tests no longer stopping expungement records. I believe that was signed into law. And so now you can expunge your cannabis record while smoking cannabis, you know, actively.
Well, I am going to go with this one about the Cannabis Business Association. Leading Illinois cannabis trade group pushing to block bill to aid social equity licensees. Boo. And I don't need to, I won't read the whole thing, but it was just the craft licensees wanted to and still want to, because nothing has happened with it, increase the square footage they're allowed to start with from 5,000 square feet to 14,000 square feet. And the Cannabis Business Association, with members such as PharmaCann, Cresco Labs, and Verano, uh, opposed that legislation because they said it was just like so those people could sell out or whatever. But really, the intention was to allow them to attract more investment because it's like $8 million or something to build the smallest grow operation. And it's easier to get funding if you can say, hey, well, we can grow a lot more weed.
Yeah, and I think Gronin released a later article where they sort of kind of, maybe my memory is wrong. We'll return to this in a future episode, but I believe they tried to deny that they opposed it, or to what extent they opposed it, or why. At least maybe they clarified, because people were upset at the time. People pointed it out, just like you
Hmm.
said. Boo. So,
Well, and
hey,
they've opposed it still, like
well, and
they've never supported it.
I'm never not gonna pass over this. Please talk about other things they've opposed, which would have been good for the Illinois state of Illinois. We've kind of talked about a few, but
Well,
please.
home grow for all, no license caps. Because the thing about license caps is like you don't have to have a cap at the state level. Like there will always be a de facto cap because local communities are going to limit how many shops are going to open. It's
Yeah,
not like you can just open. You have to get a local approval to open.
yeah,
So that's so just making the whole process and wasting all the time with the lawsuits for like 2, 3 years. It's like you could have just skipped that. You would have had a de facto license cap anyway. At least that's how
right.
I usually view it.
Yeah. One of my things, and Phil, please feel free to call me out on this, because I acknowledge that this might be a leap, but hear me out. The Was it CBAI or MBAI at the time? Either way, we're talking about the same group, basically. Uh, they actively supported the CRTA. I mean, I don't think that's disputable. But my point in bringing that up is that they didn't support Ammon's bill, which prevented political contributions regarding like in and around the cannabis industry, which I felt. I mean, I'll just stop there. I mean, people can put together what I'm trying to say.
I like that at the bottom of this article it says an earlier version of this article incorrectly stated that Green Thumb Industries was a member of CBAI. It left the association in May 2021 because they have their own lobbyists out. I mean, they're not supporting this stuff either.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And that whole thing with leaving the group was just like a stunt.
I think, fuck, I mean,
I mean, they
I'm
provided like the startup money for that group.
that's what I'm saying. Some of these companies will say the same thing about the New York Medical Cannabis Industry Association. It's funny how it all ends up being that type of, cannabis industry associations, right? They, wrote a chapter in one of their bills to lawmakers about the fallacy of home grow. And this caused arguably a lot some other companies to do the same thing. I'd ask them for statements on why are you part of this group, and they're like, well, we're not part of that group anymore. And it's like, okay, but you were.
Yeah. And it's not like you're like a proponent for, like you should be a proponent for further decriminalization.
I love that you always add that. You're really good
If you're
about,
being,
yes.
because if you're making money, uh, it just, it's a weird situation to be making money off the plant and not be at least talking. I mean, you should be like supporting it if you're making a bunch of money. Yeah, you should be like making political action committees and like trying to support ones that are out there to try to lobby for this stuff. But even just saying like, hey, I support everyone's right to grow weed at home as an
Hmm.
owner of a cannabis company is a good thing.
Yeah, it'd be a really big thing, you know? And frankly, like you said, we're kind of waiting for a company. Like if a company just leads the charge on that, no matter what they've done in the past, they'll get a little respect from me for if they
Well,
actually
and
push for it, you
I just
know?
think it's funny because like I love weed. I really have very little interest in growing my own weed. Like
Yeah.
I got a bunch of home grow from my mother-in-law one time, and I remember just trimming it for like half an afternoon and being like, this is not for me.
Right. But you realize, and maybe this is where they oppose us and you realize the value in allowing I mean, not only the fact that you just believe, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, so correct me if I'm wrong, but you believe that people just shouldn't be in jail for something as silly as that. Not only that, but like, yeah, I'm high and I forgot where I was going. It's just a double
Yeah,
standard that's crazy, you know. What I
shouldn't
guess I'm trying
shouldn't
to
be
say
getting
is,
in jail for
so
weed.
the flip side, right? I was going to talk about the flip side. So you see the value in decommodifying cannabis. They see the absence of value in
I
decommodifying
wouldn't even
cannabis.
call it I wouldn't even call it decommodifying. Like,
Sorry, I stole that from David Beanstalk just because I really liked how he explained that what it would do if, even if you don't grow. He kind of was explaining your position, like even if you don't grow, push for this because it'll cause cannabis to just be, the accepted value to naturally fall, you know?
oh, well, right. And that's like, even if in Illinois, like if they hadn't increased, like if the number of shops was the same, if home grow for all was legal,
Yes.
people would be doing more home growing.
Hmm. Yeah. And there'd be a little trading going on, even though there might be a rule that says you can't. It's funny that we've pulled this up in the past, but if you look on Illinois' FAQ right now, you can gift cannabis in the state of Illinois, but it can't be cultivated at home. So they're basically telling you can only gift state ordained cannabis with a
Well,
few conditions.
that
Yeah.
homegrown might not be remediated, God forbid.
Right. Right. The few conditions, if people are wondering, just, I don't mean to loosely reference something. It'll be really quick and we can either continue on this story or hop to the next. The conditions are that whoever you're gifting them the cannabis to, it cannot exceed their possession limit, and the giftee, the person you're gifting cannabis, must be 21 years of age or older. So those are the conditions. It can't be cultivated at home by law. So
Can you
three
get
conditions on that.
can you gift to a med patient if they're a minor?
I don't believe so. And in fact, I'm glad you brought that up. I don't actually know the answer to that, but what I can tell you, the question that people, there's confusion about this all the time. Like whenever we post, like, fun fact, you can gift. And we did it a lot during this holiday season because it's like, oh, give the gift of giving. And we're trying to really push people to, like, not necessarily gift dispensary weed, but let's get in the spirit of giving weed to each other so that it's like more of a thing, right? And one of the number one sources of confusion is among medical patients who have been told, I cannot give away my cannabis. No, you can't. Medical cannabis that
Right.
has been
Yeah.
allotted to you. That's the difference.
Like you're
It's
not
been
even supposed to like pass the joint, right?
correct. Technically speaking,
Yeah.
you can't even do that. So that's
So
the
funny.
difference, folks, is that when you're a medical cannabis patient, that cannabis is allotted to you and you don't have to pay a tax on it. And that's really, I think that second part is really why they don't want you gifting it, is
In
because
like in like the consumption lounge in like Mundelein, uh, do they have a med and rec menu and are they watching you?
I don't know. I, here's my question about that. So they sell, I bet you here's the answer. I'm not confident, but I'm just putting two and two together. I don't know. Is that a medical location?
I think it is, yeah. I think it's one of the
Okay.
like busy. I think it's the reason I
You know
remember
what? You're
that is because
right
I think
because
when
of,
I've looked, it's like the busiest one.
yeah, you're
Like it
absolutely
had
right.
like the most registered patients at it. I remember seeing that.
Yeah. So never mind. I was gonna say that maybe the consumption lounge was adult use only. I don't know though. I don't know how they would do that. I'm willing to bet you that they just kind of overlook it, but I don't know.
Well, yeah, it's kind of, I mean, what do you get? I mean, it's a silly rule,
Uh-huh. It is silly. It is silly.
but you
Um,
would just think at how much these shops are like want to be on the regulations because they're scared of getting in trouble or whatever, or people that work there maybe. Um, I would just wonder, like, are they watching the med patients to make sure they don't share their medicine?
right, right. Um, just a funny thing you made me think of. I don't know how you made me think of this, but during my research into home grow, I found some statements from senators that opposed home grow. And I should get this. I don't know if he was a senator. I think I just said senator. I think he was in the House of Representatives. I need to get his name, but folks, you can look it up and probably find this. It's an interaction between a man, some dude from Southern Illinois, and Representative Cassidy, and he asks her about home grow, and he's like, well, so the thing about cannabis that's in stores is that we are testing it for potency, and we're making sure that it, stays within thresholds and everything else. He's like, how are we going to control that when it's grown at home? Aren't they going to be able to grow as potent weed as they want? And it's like, her response is actually perfect. She said, like, there's a limit to what you can do horticulturally. Like, I love how she just like that. That's like the first time.
Illinois cannabis companies would never know that. They're getting
Right.
that like hasn't there been like 40% on the shelves?
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, I believe it was Brownie Scout by GTI, if folks want to Google it. Tested out at like 39%. Justine actually got a sample of that batch that tested at that high, and it was just okay.
Yeah, I think over a certain number, it just doesn't make that much of a difference unless you're like getting into concentrates.
Yeah, I also truly believe that cannabis testing is just, I don't want to say that it's like completely flawed, but it's like kind of flawed.
Well, the standards aren't there.
Yeah.
There aren't like real universal standards. Like I know with this like testing stuff over in Michigan that they've been going through, there's like all this talk of like, because it depends when you have a sample and you're testing it, it depends how moist it is, how dry it is. Uh, there's like so many factors that go into what that final number you get out is.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like when you grind it, are you adding the keef back in or not adding it back in?
Right.
Like there's like
Yeah, I just think we haven't quite figured that all out yet. But remind me when we get off air, I can tell you about the lab that I was telling you about. We can't talk about it on air yet, but I'll reference it.
real teaser.
Yeah. So I
I
think
think
you
the
just did a
next one
story,
is
right?
you.
Okay,
Hmm.
cool. This is one that we referenced last time, and I just kind of grabbed this story because there's just parts of it that are really funny to me. And I don't mean to be brash. I think that's the word I was looking for last time. I don't mean to like um, you know, approach this like, but it just is really funny. So Cresco Labs apparently launched an Illinois Cannabis Education Center. And so to their credit, before I get into the things that I thought was so funny, I have read in other articles that they have plans to help like, and then they've actually financed some of the licensees so far, so that's them putting their actions behind their words. But they do plan to help, I guess, with like compliance on some of these licensees and through the regulatory process and whatever. So I wanted to put that out there before I was brash. They do seem to actually be doing good things, but just at first glance, this fucking idea is so hilarious to me. So the idea unveiled on a December morning was to open the Illinois Cannabis Education Center to use the brick and mortar dispensary Bones as a way of reeling in and training people who are interested in contributing to the industry. So I this quote is funny. When we talk about it, the Cannabis Education Center, we're not the first or the last to dive into social equity work. There are plenty of community organizations who have been doing this work, who have been doing a phenomenal job at fighting this fight. And we really just wanted to lend our support in the effort in the ways that we can. So essentially what they did was they built a dispensary. So they had a dispensary built. They're saying they moved from one location to another. And instead of getting rid of that facility, they decided to transition it into a full-scale cannabis education center. And so you can get behind the counter, work out your training and technique, everything from customer engagement to inventory tracking. They even have mock like regulatory checkups, like, oh, hey, there's an inspector here. What do you got to do? I'm sorry. That just like everything else that they're doing sounds great. And that's why I wanted to lead with it. But that sounds ridiculous. That sounds like McDonald's University.
Yeah.
Um,
No,
I
it's
mean,
funny.
so
I mean, sell that shop. I mean, maybe they were just renting. I mean, they didn't own the building. I was like, sell that shop and just give that money to social equity.
Right. Give it to a person. Let them open up doors there. If it's fucking built out, like,
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't think the problem with social equity is knowing how to ring people up.
right. Thank you for seeing my point. I wasn't trying to be an asshole, but like, come on. You just like, I don't know.
Well, so much of it is performative though, right? I mean, I know that they do good things too. Like over in Michigan, this guy Michael Thompson, who was like their
Yep.
longest serving nonviolent cannabis prisoner. Um, he's he's had like a documentary funded about him, kind of funded by them, and he'll swear by them. And I would never tell that guy to anything that he says is wrong. So, but like, do I like them? No.
Sure. Sure.
But like, a broken clock can be right twice a day, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
they're bound to do some good if they have their foot in that pond, I guess. So good on them for at least doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So thanks for appreciating why I picked that story. I was hoping you would.
Oh yeah. Just the idea of it, and maybe there was very practical stuff going on there that was very helpful, but the idea of it is
Sure.
funny. It's like the children's museum with the fake grocery store. We like grab all the fake plastic items and then you bring it up to the front fake register and
Yeah, and like you say, I want to reiterate it because you said it well. I'm sure there was more going on there, but just the way that the article is written and every time I've seen it pitched, that's what it sounds like. The children's grocery store or whatever. Yeah.
someone's going to get in touch with you and be like, no, there wasn't. They had us put on aprons.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Speaking of which, I said I would plug the hotline here before you segue to your next story. I need to plug it at the beginning of the show and more often, but we'll work it out. 312-772-6844. You can give me a call. You can send me a text. I'm going to send you to voicemail. You can leave a voicemail and we can play it on the show if you'd like. If you'd like to be anonymous, we can do that. There's definitely I understand it, some certain circumstances require you to be anonymous. Anonymous. Definitely expect me to vet you. I'm not just going to throw out anonymous conjecture. But I can honor your anonymity and I can even connect you with, if you don't feel totally comfortable with me, I can connect you with more professional reporters that have a reputable history. So there are options there. Once again, that's 312-772-6844. What's your next story, Mr. Phil?
I will go with CPD cracks down on underground pot parties. Hundreds of
Boo.
gram. Oh, what was it? Seizing a kilo of weed and hundreds of grams of magic mushrooms. 5 people were hit with felony charges when city officials raided 2 pot-centric pop-up parties last week by Tom Shuba in June of this summer. Yeah, so I just picked that because, I just think it's important to keep talking about that.
Yeah.
People still getting charged with and potentially sent to prison for weed.
Yeah. In fact, I'm gonna keep plugging it, just unashamedly. We've done episode 232, part 1 of Illinois cannabis history. There's more to come, and the reason I'm bringing that back up is not just to shove it down your throats, but to reinforce your point, Phil. That I fucking added some arrests, I believe, from this month. They continue.
Yeah, well, it was interesting too because I sent you those like uh forums that I think it was Ohio State did on like cannabis licensing, and there was one on like interstate commerce.
Yeah.
And I think Shailene Title on the episode brought up the idea just of like, what do people think about the idea of like Prohibition 2.0 and the fact that if you're trying to crack down on unregulated sales, like you're just going to be caught doing the same thing you were doing during Prohibition. Like you're never like you can't stop it. Like that's what they learned the first time that we tried to
Right.
prohibit weed. Like you lost Prohibition. So even though now you have an avenue for people to do it legally, especially if you have high barriers to entry, like people are still going to do it illegally. But we need to like not fight that drug war on weed again. We got to
Exactly.
end that.
I mean, I just sent to you earlier this week,
But
and
I just like that that was part of that like discourse, you know, and people like pretty much everyone that was in those panels was saying like, yeah, like we shouldn't be doing that. You know,
yeah,
you need to make it like easy enough and appealing enough to be legal.
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, uh, I sent you
Because
earlier this week that New York added a hotline where not, I mean, where you report, illicit cannabis activity. And it's just like, come on.
right. Well, and really the problem is you need to make the demand for it go away. You need to make people want legal weed, like everybody.
Yeah.
Whether that's home grow or not, like most people will want something from a store. That's
It
just
right.
how like society functions.
Well, and
Like the tomatoes idea, you know?
mhm. I get so I asked this question the other day, and like I get so frustrated because I'll tell you what people usually answer, and it's like, damn it, I know you're gonna say that, but please give me a different answer. Uh, I will ask, why doesn't this cat and mouse game exist with alcohol? And they'll be like, well, it did, but it's been a long time since Prohibition and blah blah blah. And I'm just like, okay, okay, fair enough, but like, how do we speed that up? All
Well,
right.
it does exist with alcohol in certain parts of the country.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I know I've seen I don't know if it was like an Anthony Bourdain thing or some kind of National Geographic, but I know I've seen in like Appalachia, there's like
Huh.
unregulated bars that sell their like home distilled liquor, you know, like there's just a culture of it in a certain area of the country. And I wouldn't even doubt like, you know, there are like I don't doubt that there are people that have like bars in their house somewhere, you know, like there have to be like unregulated, like people doing business as some kind of unregulated club or unregulated bar. So
Right.
that would be kind of what I would say is the equivalent.
Yeah.
It's just not in like, it's not a popular thing, you know, you got to probably be like a very specific subculture or population to find that appealing.
Yeah. And I don't mean to spin it in a different direction at all, but I hope you get where I'm going with this. Like that population you just talked about that does exist. I'm sure there, like you say, I'm sure there are bars like that. I'm sure there are underground scenes like that. And I'm willing to bet you that some of them are doing it purposefully, right? To save money on licensing and everything else. Cause, maybe the township they live in or whatever is just a bitch to get a license or something.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure some people are doing it because they're like, fuck the law. I'm opening up my club. I'll just have everybody keep it down
Yeah.
low. I'm sure that some people are doing it because they don't even really realize like they're just like, yeah, I thought you could just do this. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, like you know, like buying a keg and charging people $5 or $10 for a cup, you know, like is
Right.
that running and on, you know, if you're making money on that, I guess that would be like a unlicensed,
And thank you for
you know,
bringing this up
liquor
because
sale situation almost.
I had this epiphany the other day. I went to a tailgate for an Illini football game in Champaign, Illinois, and there's just alcohol on tables. Like I literally could have, I didn't even know these people, and you just go over and fill up your cup, like excessive amounts of alcohol, excessive, like, and it's,
Yeah,
I mean, enough to
that's
kill
America.
people. Yeah, and I mean, look, I have no problem with it. Like I like that's kind of why I am so anti possession limit. I'm like, look, yeah, maybe I am buying more than I can humanly consume, but isn't that the point? Like I bring it to so that everybody can have some,
Well,
you
that's
know?
one of the things that's so wild. Like even when people talk about something like mushrooms, it's like, you know, like being like insanely drunk and tripping on shrooms are like similar kinds of wildly out of control, you know? Like when you're crazy drunk, that, you know, like I don't know that you can overdose on mushrooms,
Right.
you know, but you can definitely kill yourself getting too drunk. But just being like immobilized, like alcohol is kind of a crazy drug. We're just so used to it as a society, you know?
Absolutely, dude. Yeah, alcohol is super crazy how normalized it is. Coffee too. I mean, I know we've said this in the past and we can get on to our next story, but I really think the best analogy for cannabis is coffee. I can drink too
Oh,
much
yeah.
coffee in the morning. I can smoke too much weed in the morning. Like it
It's
happens, you
it's
know?
funny too because I love weed, I smoke a lot of weed, but I could not like coffee is my number one drug. Like I could live without weed. I could not live without coffee.
Yeah. I mean, it's addictive too. You get
Oh yeah.
withdrawals from it. You literally have withdrawals from it. So,
Hmm.
yeah, and I mean it's totally normalized like in work culture. Like don't talk to me unless I've had my coffee. Every work I've made this point on the podcast in the past and it's actually a point I think that Michael Pollan made either in his book or on some show I've seen. If you've not heard of him by the way, check out his books and stuff. Michael Pollan. But he's, talking about how coffee became super normalized in our work culture and how this first company pioneered the coffee break. They found that if you gave people time and the space to drink some coffee, that they would work longer, put in more time and everything
Well,
else.
I remember hearing something too. It was coffee, like coffee, like springboarded our like evolution as a society.
Well,
Like
because
civilizations that like started drinking coffee like way back in the day, like advanced quicker than people that didn't drink coffee.
and I to your point, I think what I
I
heard
don't
about
remember
that
where
is
I heard that, but
I think Michael Pollan's talked about it, but maybe, I'm sure others have too, but he was talking about back, in the past, the only source where you could get, something clean to drink if it was distilled, an alcoholic beverage. So a lot of
hmm,
people were fucked up all the time. Or finally coffee came around and you could drink
hmm.
something, and because coffee needed so much heat that you'd not get sick from drinking it. And so yeah, I mean, I maybe we're talking about two different things, but I feel like that really backs up your point. So we're
Hmm.
high. We're high. We're having fun.
Well, it
So
is just interesting too, because you think about like not that weed wasn't very prevalently used, but you would think it'll be a little more commonplace and more prevalently used. And you think like, oh, just how coffee can affect a society. Like you just wonder how maybe society might be a little different once weed is just so commonplace.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. Well, let's see. Um, I think for our next story, I'm gonna pick this one, which was shared by you, but it was posted by somebody else, and I won't get into where it was, posted and such, but I will just say that I can share the stories that they're referencing. So, this is their commentary, the persons that posted this. This industrious businessman, quote, found with $820,000 worth of cannabis, end quote, gets 6 years in prison for providing a valuable service to our community. This sex predator, who, quote, committed at least 4 separate acts of sexual conduct with a juvenile, end quote, gets 90 days in jail. Yeah, the question they asked is who would you rather
Well,
have living in your neighborhood?
I
So
think it was the distinction was it was about because this is out in like McHenry County,
yeah.
which seems to be kind of like a cannabis conservative area. I see a lot of like people charged out there with larger
Mhm.
amounts of weed. Um,
Yeah, McHenry,
the
which our
idea that it
friend,
was like I think the same district attorney was like prosecuting these or handling
right.
these. So just
Hmm.
the idea that around the same time for these two charges, these were the punishments that these two guys wound up with. And
Yeah,
I think I'm not sure. I think isn't 6 years, isn't that like a mandatory minimum technically for like his would have been like a class X felony for so much weed.
it might
So
be.
I don't know. I don't know like if they have that much
Oh,
discretion.
it just said it
Not
actually.
sure.
Hold on a second. It just said it. Lucas was charged with 1 count of manufacturing or delivering cannabis over 5,000 grams, a class X felony, and 1 count of possession over 5,000 grams, a class One felony. What? Oh, it's possession and
But that
manufacture.
class X felony charge, like, I don't know if that's like, if there's like a minimum sentence they give you for that, was what I was saying, because that's like the
Oh,
highest.
understood. Yeah, I don't know.
Because I
I don't
think
know.
like per count, it's like a certain number of years. I remember seeing like 6 to 12 years. So you would think it can't be less than 6 years then, right?
Right.
Which is
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. I'm
Like
gonna
they
Google
really,
it.
at least, I mean, if they weren't gonna make larger amounts legal, I mean, at least make those larger amounts like a class one felony or a class two felony, like people, if you're gonna put them in jail, don't put them in jail for over 6 years.
Yeah. Looks like, yeah, the offense has a mandatory minimum sentence of 6 to 30 years. So that's a class X felony. And yeah, I mean, I was just kind of well, I guess it's related. I was watching this show about jail the other day. I enjoy watching cops and I enjoy watching like shows about that because not only do the cops make fundamental mistakes that if shown in court would be like the whole thing would be thrown out. And I'm not even an attorney and I feel I can say that I can feel I can say that confidently. But also on the other end of the spectrum, you have people that just give up their fucking rights. Just let the cops do whatever they want
Yes.
and flap their fucking
You
mouth.
you read about that all the time too. People
Yeah.
consent to searches and stuff like that.
And I get it. I mean, these cops are good at making it seem like either they're your friend or that you can't say no, but you really should just. I mean, I feel like the Pot Brothers at law
Well,
have very good advice. You know,
yeah, but a lot of people get very flustered with when police pull them over. So you just kind of like deer in
sure.
headlights.
Yeah, no,
I feel like I,
is
I get pulled over literally all the time for some reason. I rarely ever get a ticket. I feel like I'm good at talking my way out of it.
yeah. You're probably so used to it now.
But yeah, I got pulled over like 3 times this year.
Really?
That
Damn.
seems like a lot, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah, it does. It does.
I do live in a very like police heavy part of the city, but they live over here. So they're like coming to and from their house. They're not like working. I just feel like I have bad luck.
Yeah, you're just in their way on the way home. Like this
Well, there was
motherfucker.
one, the last one. It's actually a funny story. I was like driving down the street. It was night, and I saw this guy speeding up really fast behind me. So I just kind of jerked to the right and stopped suddenly, and like where the parking was. And I thought he was going to blow past me. I was like, I'll just let this dick go past me. But no, they slow down and turn on their lights and pull me over and get behind me. And then he's like having me roll down my windows and he's like asking me if I have anything in the car, which of course I do. But I was like, no, no, no. And he's like, why'd you pull over like that? And I was like, oh, well, I just, sometimes like people drive like dicks around here. So I was just pulling over to let them drive by, not realizing I was like calling him a dick. But he was like, oh, okay, okay. And I was just like, I'm just going to the store. Like, I'm not doing anything, and they let me go. But after I left, I was like, oh, I totally just called him a dick.
That's funny. That is funny. Yeah,
And then I saw him blow a stop sign like 2 seconds later and
of
then like
course.
get behind someone really aggressively. And I was like, I feel like he's just like driving around provoking people, like pulling them over.
Yeah, I fucking hate it when they do that. That's the worst when they just like get right up behind you. Um,
Well, I mean, that's just why, like, if you have weed in the car, just have it in the right way or be discreet about it. Don't be
mm,
like, I don't know. I see people like just smoking giant joints driving down, like you can smell it, you can see them. I always just think like,
yeah,
that is that's like, DUIs cost thousands of dollars to deal with. That's like an expense that no one really wants.
yeah, yeah. That's super important point you bring up. I know this sounds crazy, and I hate to feed into the frenzy. Like you said earlier, it's like Illinois cannabis and the way we legalized it. We're like, yeah, this is a good thing. We're sorry for all the times we fucked up, but this is a bad thing. So only a few people can grow it and you can't grow it yourself and blah blah blah, right? Um damn,
There was that
I
there
lost where I
was
was
that
going. You
bill
go.
though, there was that bill recently to remove all kinds of like probable cause,
Yeah.
like all kinds of things where if they saw weed in your car, it wouldn't be probable cause to search you.
Yeah.
That
Oh, I
was kind of
remember
cool. I would like
that.
to see something like that pass.
Yeah, we'll cover both of those stories. There's not only the smell of raw cannabis is no longer, apparently it was ruled in a a local ruling, or a kind of the first level of court. And look, people that know more than me are like laughing right now, because but the point is, the reason I say that is because this could be challenged. Don't take this as gospel, folks, but raw
Right.
cannabis and smokable cannabis have, in court cases in Illinois, been proven to not be reason for search. Now, whether or not the cop that's going to pull you over hypothetically in the future, hopefully this doesn't happen to you if you're listening, it may happen to Phil, it sounds like often. Hopefully the cop that you get pulled over for is aware of this, but I'll tell you right now that doesn't seem like a lot of them are. In fact, they used to have an attitude that they could run their dog around your car, and if the dog signaled, then that meant you weren't transporting cannabis correctly, which is just fucking insane. Um, and all I'm saying is that could still happen today, folks. So just be careful, like Phil said, do it responsibly. And to finally get to my point that I was, being so long-winded about, treat it like a gun, treat it like a firearm, put it out of arm's reach and in the trunk of your car, in a case. Make sure that so here's actually some solid advice that a law enforcement officer gave me. If you're done drinking wine at a restaurant, you can ask for the bottle of wine to go at some restaurants, but at least according to some local regulations, what the restaurant is required to do is cork it, plastic wrap it, do a bunch of different things to make it known that this motherfucker's closed, right? I guess what I'm saying is, do something like that. You just make it to where it's not even a question. I'm just trying to give people advice.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Be careful, folks. Don't just think
Be
that it's
careful out there.
legal. It's legal. I can fucking put it in my ear while I drive. No. Like, I'm not saying that
Well, it's
that's
just
necessarily
because we're
wrong,
talking
but be
about
careful.
we were talking about those class X felony, like that's equivalent to like a rape charge. Having, like selling a ton of weed is they see that as an equivalent, like in the law. So it's just like that improper transport. Like I think Evan Bruno is who I heard talk about this. It's like it is the same because it's a class A misdemeanor. It's like the same class of offense as a DUI. So it
Yeah.
doesn't matter if you're it doesn't even matter if you're smoking or if you're under the influence of weed. Just having it is equivalent to being drunk and driving.
Yeah. And
Like
another
it's
example,
going to cause you the same amount of shit.
right? Another specific example I know he used, since you said, but you just reminded me, it was a class A misdemeanor. He said domestic violence is a class A
Oh yeah, yeah.
misdemeanor.
Hmm.
So
Like assault or battery.
yeah, it's funny that that's equivalent somehow. Having cannabis in a baggie versus a jar, right? All of a sudden you're equivalent to beating your wife.
Well, also
like
not to like keep talking about this forever, but just that wasn't a charge before.
correct. That
Like
that is
you could get charged for being under the influence of for being stoned and driving. Like I was in a car one time, of course, and got pulled over while we were smoking. But my friend who wasn't smoking was driving, and they gave her a field sobriety test. So it's like, they would do that anyway before legalization. But it's just funny that like now we would have all been charged with improper transport.
yes. Thank you for bringing that up. That's a perfect way to close this particular conversation. Like, on this topic, it's like that before 2020, before the CRTA, which legalized cannabis in air quotes in Illinois, yeah, you could just have like a baggie in your pocket because it was decriminalized. Any amount less than 10 grams. I believe it was 10 grams. It's in our report in 232 if you want to check it out. We've got a citation for that. Um, it was just a citation. That's a $250 citation. Now, like you say, it's a class A misdemeanor. That's after we legalized it.
Yeah, it's just it's a funny thing, a funny detail people don't think about, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So, So that was the state's attorney post. Thank you, by the way, also for putting in context that they were seemingly charged. That's really the point of me bringing up that story that I found, is like this state's attorney, in pretty quick succession, acted on these two cases, and it's hilarious, the disparity in sentencing when you consider what actually happened.
I think is my story next.
Yes.
My last one is Missouri voters legalizing cannabis or legalizing adult use. They became the 21st state beginning in November. And I think their sales start like next month or February, something like that. I heard.
Yeah. We'll have to look out and see if any businesses that we can sleep, like if you buy their product, you can sleep at night, open up, you know what I'm saying? Like a small business.
Well, I think there's more operators over there. I don't know exactly like the specifics. I think, are the licenses capped or is it
I don't
limited at all?
shoot, I don't know much of
I just
anything.
know the like amendment thing. It's kind of like Michigan, where it's like since it's enacted by the voters, you need like a super majority in the legislature to undo any of it or change like a lot of things about it.
Right. Right.
But the measure allows adults to possess up to 3 ounces and to home cultivate up to 6 flowering plants, 6 immature plants, and 6 plants under 14 inches. So that's how they do it. But yeah,
Nice.
so they're allowed to carry 3 ounces. We only have 30 grams. So it's interesting. I wonder what their penalties are for like over that.
Yeah.
I'm sure normal has like
I was about to say, I wonder if they've updated their.
no, yeah, I don't know if they've updated it yet because I don't know if it's like effective yet.
Sure. Sure.
But this, I put this as like a big story in Illinois cannabis because I do think that this is like neighboring states and competition is going to be one of the biggest things to help change the dynamics in the market here, I think.
I think they updated it, dude, and this looks pretty stellar. Because I'm looking at this and they've got their 3 ounces, no penalty. Oh, wait a minute. What the fuck is this? Up to 10 G's. Yeah, I don't know. I think this is from the existing policy. Maybe not.
Wait,
Beginning
no.
12/8/22.
Is that for maybe underage? I don't know. Because
Yeah.
it says the up to 3 ounce thing, and it would have begun this month.
I wonder, and it's got 2 stars next to it. What are the.
Well, it's up there. It said starts December 8th.
Yeah, there was. Oh, okay. Beginning on 12/8/2022. Gotcha. Yeah, I saw this one down here though too. Missouri favor legalization. Interesting. I don't know.
Wait, go up back to the penalty thing.
All the way to the top.
Mm-hmm.
This.
Yeah, I wonder what that is.
Yeah. If folks are watching right now or um understand what this is, definitely write
Maybe
in.
these are what the penalties were before, and they just haven't gotten rid of them yet.
Yeah, must be. So
Like
be interesting.
this has been the interim update.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, because they don't have. It looks like they don't have cultivation yet. Maybe,
Yeah,
or maybe that's not home cultivation. Maybe that's
because that
something
just doesn't
else.
make sense. It seems like it has like two realities there.
Yeah. Yeah, I got to imagine that this will be more updated here soon. Yeah, because it's like they've got this stuff here, right? This is the new stuff in bold, but then they've got a lot of the old stuff about
Yeah,
cultivation here. So I think they're, like you say, it's kind of this transition. They want to, I don't know. But yeah, interesting, dude. Anything else to
yeah, it'll
add
be
on that?
interesting. Just that Kansas City is a fun city, so hopefully, next time I'm there, I can check out some of the shops.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Well, hey, I have to agree with you. I'm very excited for what Missouri has in store. I really hope that they let's see it. Let's see them try to compete with Michigan, because that would be awesome to have a state that's right next door. You don't even have to go through the horrible hellscape of Indiana.
Well, it'd
Um,
be an option for people, like how far is St. Louis from you? Like 3 hours?
right. Yeah.
Yeah, like that's about the distance to like a Battle Creek from Chicago, so that's the distance a lot of people are willing to drive to stock up on stuff. So I think certainly if the market over there is providing more options and cheaper options in particular, like a lot of people are going to be going over there to get stuff. I don't
Yeah.
know how much that would really affect sales though, because you'd think enough, there's going to be newer shops opening, prices will like, if it's only 5 or 10%, they'll come down here a little bit.
Yeah. Here's my thing, dude. You just look at the border of Missouri and Illinois and think about here, for visual purposes, I'll show a map. Think about down here in Illinois, this area of Illinois. I'll zoom out a little bit so you can kind of see where we are. So Missouri, and Illinois, like all of this area right here, very few dispensaries,
Oh yeah,
very
yeah,
few.
true.
I mean, what's crazy is that Champaign is one of the only cities, I think, in Southern Illinois that had two dispensaries. I think at this point, maybe there are some towns that have two dispensaries, but I think it's about to have 3 or 4 dispensaries possibly. So it's weird that Champaign, that's like kind of the biggest concentration you're going to see of dispensaries. There's some here, there's some here. I
Yeah,
think
it'll
there's
be
some
interesting to see
here.
how it shakes out. I'll definitely be like keeping an eye on that.
Yeah, I really think this is a good option for you Southern Illinoisans. So possibly, we'll see.
Well, and you'd think this little corner down here by like, by the Ozarks kind of,
Right.
Kentucky, Tennessee,
Oh yeah, I bet you
all
they
those
jack.
people in Kentucky that are now allowed to go over and get their medicine somewhere else, like if there's cheaper options in Missouri, they're not going to be going to downstate Illinois.
Yeah, I will say if there are any Kentuckians or anybody from those states thinking about that, do be careful. Like you can Google it. I just read like the other day, and there's a big video on it. Like this couple driving out of Kentucky, and they're on this like, or driving out of Illinois into Kentucky, and they're on this, shortly after they cross the border, they're on this dark street, and all of a sudden, all these cops' lights turn on, and they're at this barricade, and they're like, "What do you, you're coming out of Illinois? Oh, it smells in here. It smells like weed. What's going on in here?" All of a sudden, it becomes that conversation. So be
Dude,
careful. They did that shit.
I try not to step foot in non-legal states.
God, it's the anxiety is unreal when you're like, "Oh shit, this is the world we still live in."
The one exception I will say is I go up to Milwaukee a lot, and Milwaukee's actually decriminalized.
Mm,
So like I'll walk down the street up there smoking a joint just now, and like it's actually a similar fine. I think it's like
right.
$50 or something if you're caught smoking weed in public, and
Yeah.
like up to maybe an ounce or something like that on you.
But it's crazy when you step into a state like I mean, I was even smoking weed in Florida, and like, I mean, they've got medical there, but still, like, it's not like,
Hmm.
blowing doobies
Well,
on the beach, like you got to
when
be a
we
little
go
careful.
when we go see family in Michigan, I always insist on just driving right through Indiana.
Yeah.
Like there's just no reason to stop in Indiana.
No,
No.
no, nope. Absolutely not. Well, hey, we'll start to wrap up. I got my final story here. I love this one. Generally not, no, I won't say what I was about to say. Because it's actually a Chicago Sun-Times story. Um, Cannabis amnesty boxes rarely used to ditch weed at Chicago airports, records show. Um, my apologies for not having these numbers ready. It looks like only 34 collections have been made from January 2020 through March 20th, including 22 at O'Hare and 12 at Midway, according to logs obtained through an open records request. Only half the logs show that either cannabis, suspected cannabis, or my favorite thing the cops say, a green leafy substance, was recovered from the boxes. The others don't explicitly mention weed, with one log showing that only plastic bags were found during a check, indicating the boxes may, in some cases, double as trash cans. In many instances, multiple items, including bags and packages, were pulled from a box at once, the records show. The recovered items were destroyed 14 times, but were marked simply as received in most cases. I like that. I like imagining what received means. This is funny. It's funny. I didn't plan to bring this up, but since it's mentioned in this story, the boxes were originally blue. They're green now. The green ones are bolted to the floor. The blue ones weren't. You can imagine why the green ones are now bolted to the floor, because somebody made off with a cannabis amnesty box in the past. I don't know if they got anything. I believe it's still
I wonder how
unsolved.
disappointed, yeah, how disappointed they were to find out it was actually empty because no one uses it.
Yeah, because fucking weed is way too expensive to not smoke it all before you leave Illinois. Like,
Well, also they were there after security, you
right.
know?
Yeah,
Like,
that's the weird.
so
Yeah.
technically it'd be like they'd find the weed, give it back to you, tell you to throw it in the bin if you want to, and send you on your way.
Yeah, if that's how it works, I would love to hear from somebody if you could ride in or, you know.
I've brought edibles and carts through the airport. I still don't feel comfortable bringing flour through an airport.
Yeah. I've
I just have like too much I don't travel enough and I have too much PTSD from the before times.
uh-huh. I totally get it. And it just sucks that you could literally jeopardize your entire vacation, usually is why you're getting on a plane. If you did something like that, you know, it
Well, and I
sucks.
would think if they found it and it was like a reasonable amount, they would just like I see, I don't even know. Like you would think they would like what I don't
Well, so TSA's released guidance, like it's weird. Like basically if you're, you know, if you get caught in Chicago, they defer you to the local authorities, which are CPD, and it's just like, hey man, you can't do that. But what I've heard in some cases is that they don't necessarily stop you in Chicago or Colorado, I think is the specific case that I'm thinking of, where somebody flew out of Colorado, they had a layover in Dallas, somebody tipped off the people in Dallas and like this person is coming to Dallas and they've got weed on them. And yeah, exactly. Folks, please Google it. I read this story
well,
and I know
yeah,
that that's
depending where
vague.
yeah.
I know that that's vague, but try to
Yeah,
find
I
it.
feel
It's a
like I'm
story I read.
just I'll stick to the carts and the edibles.
Right.
I feel like I can
I
get
w-
away with that.
yeah, I've done some crazy things. We won't talk about it on air. Not
I
that
mean,
crazy, but
I remember like post 9/11, like early college days flying and like sneaking joints in my luggage in ways I thought were super ingenious. I'm sure I didn't even need to go through all the hassle, but you know,
right.
like just in those times, like probably shouldn't have been doing it.
Uh-huh.
Especially
Yeah.
flying into an airport like Boston or where the planes originated from.
Right.
In hindsight,
Hindsight is 2001. Or yeah, sorry. Okay, so three that I don't even know. I tried that 312-772-6844. If you know anything about, have you gotten in trouble at the airport? What do they do with that? Give us some insight. We want to be able to.
yeah, I would be curious to know someone's experience.
Yeah. So hey
It
man,
was funny
that
because one time I like took a train out to Seattle and then we were going up to Vancouver. So I
mm,
brought weed with me on the train and to Seattle. I brought like some like some cookies and I brought some like joints. And I remember being like so adamant, smoking it all before we went up to Vancouver. And then we get to Vancouver and I was like with my family, my parents and my sister. They just like waved us straight through, like coming off the boat that we got there on. They just like waved us straight through. I was like, could
yeah.
have brought weed. It seemed like
You were
such a
pissed.
waste.
You were pissed that they didn't
That's
stop you.
you got to travel with your parents, that
Hmm.
way. It's like the cover.
Yeah, it's like what I don't know if you've seen Narcos, and how accurate this show is also beyond me. But yeah, that's what Pablo Escobar apparently did. He would send like, you
Oh,
know,
really?
yeah, his family and people like that, and some really horrific shit too. Like he would like, I'm not gonna like whitewash Pablo Escobar. It's not like he was just
Oh, no.
giving families opportunities, but he also like loaded women up with like bags of cocaine, and there were cases where the bags exploded inside of them and they just died, and it would actually generally be pregnant women that he would choose. And so because if you had all that shit in your, yeah, like it was just less likely, I guess. I don't know. Again, how
And on
accurate
that note,
Narcos on Netflix is beyond me. On that note, that's our top stories from 2022. I'm gonna plug it again. Check out episode number 232, part one of the history of cannabis in Illinois. We also have part 1.5 out right now. You can stream that
we could
either
consider
on,
this episode a preview to episode 2,
yeah, yeah,
part 2.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, part two is going to be from a little bit before adult use sales all the way to modern day, whatever that day ends up being. So folks, we'll see you next time on the Chillinois podcast. Take care.